Hello, my name is Bradley Evans. What's your full name, please?
I'm Harold Waterson.
Can I check your ID and passport, please? That's fine, thank you. In the first part, I'd like to ask you some general questions about yourself. Let's talk about what you do. Do you work or are you a student?
I was a student until last year, so I'm quite new in the job market. I really enjoyed my university years, and I was a little apprehensive about going into the corporate world. But I did find a job quite easily. I'm a technical writer for a software firm.
How did you get this job?
I got a lead through a cousin of mine who's been in the industry for quite a while. The interview process was quite strange, as this company is full of mavericks, and they look for interesting facets of one's personality.
Is it easy to get this kind of job?
I think it might be if you're motivated, but you also need some luck to find the right position at the right time. I was fortunate to not be tied up in studies, and also maybe I almost went traveling at the time when my cousin contacted me with this possible job.
Did your studies prepare you for this job?
Not at all. I wanted to study commerce initially because I thought it would be a safe option, which I found very, very boring by the end of my second year. But I finished the third. I was mostly prepared for this job by following what my interests were, and I was really interested in computers from a young age.
Let's talk about birthdays. What do people usually do on their birthdays in your country?
Well, in my country, there's a very big barbecue culture. And so most birthdays, I guess, most festive times are spent outside. Lots of food and lots of friends. I struggle to trust people if they don't enjoy food. So I think most birthdays are big meals with friends and family.
What did you do on your last birthday?
Well, I was lucky enough to take a trip to Bali with my really sweet Brazilian girlfriend, and she took me out to dinner at a Japanese restaurant. It was wonderful.
Is it important to celebrate birthdays?
I think it is. I'm not sure that gift giving is as important as many people make it out to be. I'm not a huge fan of merchandising as a concept, but I do enjoy celebrating life. And I think having a birthday is a good reason for that.
I'd like to talk about evenings now. What do you usually do in the evening?
Well, in the evenings after I finish work, seeing as I'm still new to it, I'm generally quite tired, and I enjoy watching sitcoms, some entertainment which wouldn't be too cerebral, and I also love the films of Matthew McConaughey, even though they're mainstream and they're slightly cheesy. There's just something about, I don't know, the casting or the script writing that always interests me.
What do you like to do if you go out in the evening?
When I go out in the evening, I usually start off by having dinner with some friends. I'm a big fan of bluegrass music, so if there ever is any in the town that I'm staying in, I really love the sound of the fiddle and the banjo together. And after that, I'm properly primed for some clubbing.
Are there many things to do in the evenings in your city?
There are. There's a vast array of cuisine, and also as far as the live music is concerned, I think I'm a fan of bluegrass because the range of bluegrass musicians has expanded dramatically over the last year or so.
Let's move on to part 2. I will give you a topic and I'd like you to talk about it for 1 to 2 minutes. Before you talk, you will have 1 minute to think about what you are going to say. You may make some notes if you wish. Do you understand?
Yes, I understand.
Okay, here's your paper and pen, and here's your topic. I'd like you to describe a time when you helped someone.
Well, there's this one time when I was cycling on a mountain pass near my home, where I ran across these two German cycle tourists who were in dire straits as the lady's crank had fallen off her bicycle. And the name of the mountain pass is, well, translated from my mother tongue, the Heights of Hell. It's an unforgiving place and quite difficult to escape from if you don't have the means. Anyway, so I cycled back to my home and had to borrow a car from a friend, which took a while. And after a couple of hours, I drove all the way back up to the mountain pass, and I couldn't find these people. They said they'd wait for me, but I guess that it took too long, and they had to move on. So we had to go through to one of the side roads, which turned out to be the original route, and we tracked them down. It took hours and hours, but they were very grateful to see us, and we loaded their bicycles into the back of my car, and we drove all the way down the mountain. And I hosted them at my place for 4 days, and even though at the time it looked like we didn't have much in common because they were 50-something and I was 19, Klaus and Edith have become great friends of mine. And lots of their cyclist friends from Germany have come over to stay with me. And I have also gone over to Germany on more than one occasion to visit them. I've become great friends with their children also.
Do you often like to help people?
I do. I think it's a very important thing. That what goes around comes around mantra is a good one to live by. As often as I can. It's sometimes a bit difficult if you live in a big city like I do now, where people sort of become more cellular in their existence and don't connect with others as often as they should.
Let's move on to part 3. We've been talking about a time you helped someone, and I'd like to ask you 1 or 2 more general questions related to this. Let's talk about volunteer work. Could you suggest some types of volunteer work that you can do for your community?
In my community, there's a great shortage of low-cost housing, and there's a group of young architects and church groups who have combined to make houses with a method that's called hay bale construction, where you take clay and pack it around and compact it around hay bales to make what is a very sturdy, insulating, and fireproof shelter, and also quite inexpensive. So I spent 2 summers as a student helping to build houses with these people. It's wonderful because the whole community will pull together. It's almost like an Amish barn raising, but there's a slightly more diverse crowd that will help to build these houses. I did that for 2 summers, and I wish I could go back, but I'm not living in the same city anymore. I think that was worthwhile. Building an abode for someone.
Do you agree or disagree that children should be encouraged to do volunteer work?
Definitely. I think having financial or economic gain be the be-all and end-all of someone's existence is a terrible state of affairs. And if children can be taught that it's important and very gratifying to give to your community, it's a wonderful lesson to learn. Yeah, so we actually had some young children who were part of the clay mixing part of the clay mixing sector of the hay bale house building project. That was fun. They had a great time. Kids love getting dirty.
Sure. Could you identify what problems, if any, may arise from unpaid volunteer work?
Like the country where I come from, where there isn't a whole lot of economic prosperity across the board. It is a problem where people are sort of depended upon to do these volunteer jobs, but then without the remuneration, there are some feelings of so subtle disdain that I guess will creep in over some time. For one, I felt like my job became quite specialized, and when I had to leave, I felt extremely guilty about leaving the rest of the team in the lurch. And I would have liked to stay on, but it was just, from an economic perspective, impossible.
Let's move on to talk about charities. Could you evaluate the effectiveness of charities in helping those in need?
That depends completely on the oversight of the charity. Um, my lovely lady lived in Southeast Asia for a while, and she witnessed firsthand how many of the non-governmental organizations received blind funding with little oversight. And so there was a lot of waste where there could have been a lot of positive influence on the community. If I look at the budget for our hay bale houses, which was incredibly low, the amount of good that we did for the community was wonderful. And I think that's mostly because the management and the oversight from the government in this sense was very thorough and well thought through.
Could you discuss the different forms of aid that charities offer?
Well, there's a just very direct financial aid, of course, which I don't think is a good thing. And then there's other projects like the Peace Corps from America, which very often they'll send people with either some other philanthropist background into many parts of the world, which turns out to be not so much aid, but sort of a public relations exercise for the country that sends out those people.
Okay, one last question, Harold. Could you compare the types of aid provided by charities to those of governments in times of crisis? So say, for example, natural disasters.
Well, it has to compare the readiness of governments in this regard. If you look at the recent bombings in India, the government there had a terribly slow response rate because there was no preparedness for that. I think often with charities, because the problems that they're dealing with are more chronic than acute, the charities could have a better forecast of what they would be able to do. I feel that in times of crisis, it depends completely on the situation and where the disaster happens. And the government and their readiness is a deciding factor.
Thank you. That is the end of the speaking test.